Hi, thanks for joining me today. I'm Sarah, and today I'm going to show you how to make a blog editorial calendar using Trello. Now, if you haven't seen Trello before, you definitely have to check it out. It's a free tool and it's amazing for any kind of lists or project planning or anything like that. So I use it for everything now, for my ideas and just for collecting information, for planning, all that kind of thing. So what we're going to do, this is our Trello. When we open up Trello, this is what we see. So we're going to create a new board for our editorial calendar, and I'm going to show you step by step how to set one up, and towards the end of the video I'll show you how it works and how it's really helpful when you set it up. So bear with me if this doesn't make sense as we go. It will all make sense at the end. So this is now our editorial calendar board within Trello. If we ever want to go back to our main menu in Trello, you just press the little icon at the top and you get back to this one here. Now, here we are. So editorial calendar, the way Trello works is you've got lists, and then on those lists you can create cards. So in the case of our blog, every card that we create is going to represent a blog post. So we want to set up lists, and you can do this a number of ways. I'm just going to show you one particular way that you can set this up. So the way I'm going to set it up is I'm going to create a list, first of all, just by clicking there, for blog ideas. And we press save, and then we have our list. So just to give you an example now, I can add a card to that. So let's say how to use Trello is our first blog post. That becomes a card on that list. And then we can have how to start a blog as our second one. And that falls into our blog ideas category. And when I click on this here, I can now add heaps of information. I could write out a draft if I want of my blog post here. I can copy and paste URLs, and it will actually be a clickable link. I can also add attachments here. I can add pictures, I can add files, anything like that. We can create some checklists if we wanted to add a checklist that we can mark off the things we want to do, and we are going to use that feature, but we're not going to enter it straight into our blog post. So we won't use that right now. You can also add team members, so we can work on a blog post with a group of people, which I'll show you that feature a little bit today. You can leave comments, you can even in those comments create attachments or tag team members, things like that. So it's really cool. And then you can also add labels, so you can add particular labels. In fact, while I've got this open, we're going to set up some quick labels. So this will make sense in a minute, but I'm just going to set up a label for our published posts. I'm going to set up a guest blog post label. I'm also going to set up, actually, you know what, I'm going to change our published to capital letters just because it's published. We want to make that very clear. We're going to use a blue label for a category called writing, which I'll show you in a second. We're going to use the purple, well, actually let's make it pink for images, because images are pretty and pink is pretty. We're going to use red for our proofing, because we all know that people with proofing love to use a red marker. All right, I think that's all I need for now. So they're just some labels that we'll use a bit later on. You don't have to set them up now, but we'll come to those. So we're going to set up some more lists. Now, those labels I just created are because I actually want to create a list for each of those things. So I would like one for guest blog posts, because sometimes if it's a blog idea but someone offers to write it for me, I'd rather have it in this so I know that it's not something I have to write. I'm going to create another one for our first step in writing a blog post, and this part is optional. Obviously, you don't need to set it up like this, but this is how I'm going to set it up for this example. So I'm going to step 1 writing, step 2 proofing, very basic summary of how a blog post works here. Step 3 images. Now, the reason I've shown you this way, you could just have this as one step and have it all in there. This is really good, particularly if you have a team of people that sort of take on different roles. So you could actually have a list that sort of is allocated to each person. We're also going to create one called data signed. This is going to be for when we add our post to a calendar, that we know they're no longer an idea, they're actually implemented. And I'm just going to drag, you can just drag and drop. I'm actually going to pop that right here because I want my blog ideas, once they're assigned, to go into this one. So see how I can just drag and drop. Probably starting to see how this is going to be very helpful. We also want our published, because in fact, let's make sure it's capital published. No, just like that. And that's our list. I'm actually going to leave it at that. So you can add more, you can add less, you can do whatever. Oh, I will add one more. I'm just going to create a template, which we'll come back to in a minute. So the next step in setting up a blog editorial calendar is you want to show the Trello menu here and go to power ups, because we're going to activate the calendar power up so that we can actually see our blog posts in a very helpful calendar format. Now you'll see in here there are a lot of different power ups that you can actually attach to your boards. The only catch with this is that on the free plan you can only attach one power up per board. So one of the other boards that I use, for example, on a weekly schedule format, I have a repeating card, or card repeater, I think it's called, card repeater, and I have that enabled. So I can't use the calendar if I've got that enabled. Whereas on our blog editorial calendar, we really want the calendar, so we're going to enable that. We're not going to worry about anything else. So that is now enabled. So that's there. We've got our little calendar icon, and this brings up our calendar, which is awesome. So just to give you a quick demo of how that's going to work for us, so on these cards, you can either press this little icon here to quickly change things, or you can click on the card to open it up. Either way, you can access the due date. We're just going to set it to Saturday and save. And we're going to give a due date to this one as well. Let's say that's next week. So now these both have due dates. Because they have due dates, I would like to move them to my date assigned because they've been assigned. When I pop into my calendar, here they are. Now, the great thing I love about this calendar view is that if I decide, you know what, I'm actually going to do the blog about starting a blog first, I can just drag and drop, and I can move my Trello down here, or I can just put it on a different date. And when I close it, they've now changed the dates. Now, this one's giving me a yellow indication saying that that date is tomorrow, it's due soon. And if we get a little bit naughty and put it in the past, it'll actually flag red and say recently past due. So that's a really good indicator to make sure you're on track. The other thing I personally like to do, and this is just a bonus, is once you've got all of your stuff assigned, say you've just done a bulk import of your blog ideas and you've gone, great, I'm going to plan out the next month, dump them all in the date assigned, you can then press the three little dots here and sort them by due date. So that will pop them in order for you so that you can just focus on the top one first and hit them off one at a time, which is awesome. Now, the next little trick that we are going to do with this, and this is probably the most complicated part of the process because it's outside Trello, is we're going to invite another third-party plugin to basically work on this Trello board with us. And that plugin is called Butler. Now, you may have spotted Butler here. We're not going to use the power-up Butler. We're actually going to use the Butler Bot, which we can access by inviting him to our board. However, I've found that can be quite slow, so the best way to access it is to actually go to their website. So we're going to head over to Chrome here. I've got it open here, but just so you can see, it's butlerfortrello.com. Now, once you've signed up the first time there'll be a few extra steps. You'll come to this screen, and it will have all of your boards. So if we can click on here, we've got our boards. And we're looking at our editorial calendar. And you can see here, because I haven't invited Butler yet, I can press Invite Butler. And then we're just going to say yes to this. Wait for that to happen. And now, if we head back to Trello, we should find a brand new list called Butler. And it's really important not to delete this one because this Butler is our butler. He will basically do what we tell him to do. And this is the key to automating Trello. So I use Butler on pretty much every board that I have. I use him on my weekly schedule, on my business plan, on everything, because he can automate things, which is awesome. So the first thing we're going to do is, well, actually, I'll quickly show you. If we go to Butler, where's Butler? No, Butler's not in my list, so I can't show you. Okay, we go to our instructions here and we'll find it. So if you open up the instructions in Butler, you'll get a bit of a quick start guide. So you've got the Butler dashboard, which is what we were looking at before. You've also got the command builder, which if we go to that, that's also the website. And you can then build the Butler commands, which is a really good place to start if you just don't know what to do. You could basically say, you know, every day do this, or you can say when a card is overdue by a date, when a card is added to a particular board. So we're actually going to use that one. We're going to say when a card is added to the list, for example, yes, I'll show you this right now. When a card is added to the list, let's add to the guest blog post list, for example. Okay, so we've got our trigger. When a card is added to the list, guest blog post, the action that we wanted to take is we want it to add a label. So let's have a look at our options here. We've got lots and lots of different options. I should have looked up what it comes under. List, create a new list. No, we don't want to do that. We want to let's see. Find a card. No. We don't want to do that either. There are lots of different, here we go. So we want to add a label. So we want to add the yellow label that we created before, and that yellow label was called guest blog post. So we want to do that. So you'll notice down here, it's now created a command for us. When a card is added to the list, guest blog post, add the yellow guest blog post label to the card. Now it is really important that these match your descriptions exactly. So this one, we've got capital letters in front of each. Really important that that matches this exactly. If we don't have a capital here, but we do on the other list, it won't work. So really important key that it needs to be the same. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to highlight this, copy it, and we're going to go back to Trello and we're going to add a card in Butler, and this is where we're going to paste it. So we're just pasting the command there and we press add. And then Butler will give us a tick. The tick means Butler has recognized what we've asked it to do. And in fact, if you open it, you'll see the comments, Butler Bot says understood. So that's a good sign. We want that. If you give Butler a random command or just something that doesn't make sense, he will give you a big alert saying, I'm sorry, but I don't understand. So that's a really good way for us to make sure that we're getting our instructions correct for our Butler. So just to test this, when a card is added to the list, guest blog post, add the yellow label. So let's see if that works. Let's say that we're going to do a guest blog post on how to use Trello. So we're dragging it in and voila, we now have a beautiful yellow label that's going to follow us around, which is very cool. So that's one of the things that I like to do with automating. Now you can do it through the command center like we've just seen. There is also a Butler for Trello support board where if you can't find the automation you're looking for, Butler have their own board within Trello. And you can see they have heaps and heaps of example boards here of all the different commands that you can add. So on a certain due date, you can have moving it to the due list, things like that. We're not going to go too much into that because I'm going to give you basically the exact commands that we'll be using in this. The other thing you can do is just type a command in. So once you've sort of got an example here, you can basically copy that and just word it a bit differently to line up with what you're wanting. So if we wanted to get our step 1 writing to add a label, we would say the same thing. When a card is added to list, step 1 writing, come on, add the, what color did we do? We did a blue, writing label to the card. All right, so we're going to add that, or you can just press enter. That will also work. Great, it's understood. So we're going to add the same thing. In fact, I'm going to copy and paste. Or actually, before we do these, I'm going to do something else because I want to show you a few other things first, and we're going to build those into these steps. So back to here, we've got our blog post. Now, when you have a blog post, obviously there's a lot of steps involved in writing a blog post. It's not as simple as just writing. You have a lot of steps involved in each of these main steps. So the way I set it up is I create a template card here. I'm just going to call this template blog post. Now within that card, we're going to create some checklists. So we're going to create a writing checklist. Whoop, that's not how you spell writing. Writing checklist. We're also going to add another checklist called proofing checklist. And we're going to create a third checklist called images checklist. Now obviously you can do as many or as few of these as you want. Okay, so in our writing checklist we're going to have write content, research, we'll just keep it simple, add hyperlinks, done. Proofing checklist, we want correct typos and correct grammar. That will do for now. Images checklist, we want a title image. We want a Pinterest image, maybe. Pinterest image. And maybe we want maybe we even want a Facebook share image. Okay, so there's our checklist. And that's all saved in our template blog post. So we're not actually going to really look at this again. It's just going to sit in our template folder here as a template. So now what we want is we want Butler to copy our checklists over to our blog posts at the right times. So you could either have them all at once, or what I'm going to do is we're going to be really sneaky and we're going to say that when we add our card to the writing step, which it's put our nice little label on there now because we told Butler to do that, we're going to actually ask it to add that checklist from the writing list as well. Okay, but we're not going to add all the lists, we're only going to add the writing list because at this point that's all we want to do. So back over to Butler here, and we're actually going to combine this with, because we want this all to happen when the card is added to the list step 1 writing. So rather than creating a whole separate command, we're going to add on to this command. So we're going to say add the blue label, and we are also going to add the writing checklist. Now I'm saying checklist twice because this one's actually what I've called it. So this one is the one that you need. Whatever's within these you can replace with whatever you've titled them if you've called them something different. So I'm going to add the writing checklist and to the card with the name, and at this point you can change the name if you want to, but I'm actually going to keep it the same. Okay, so we're going to call it the writing checklist. And we're going to press enter, and we're waiting for Butler. He doesn't understand. That's not good. Okay, checklist with the name. Name with, okay, we don't need the. Let's try that again. Understood. There you go. So we don't want to add the name, we just want to add name. Okay, so then we've got that one here. So let's give it a go. We'll just move this one back here for now. The writing label's already on there, but let's see if it adds our checklist for us. Now, if it doesn't happen straight away, sometimes you do need to refresh, but it looks like, because it's only got 3 items, our writing checklist is now here. So we can now tick these off. We can even hide the completed ones if we want, or show them, and when we're all done, it gives us a nice green marker that we've done our writing checklist. So that's awesome. So from there, we want to repeat the same thing with proofing and images, and I want to take it an extra step, and I want to remove the writing label before I move it over. So rather than doing that manually, otherwise by the end we're going to have heaps of labels. So what I want to do is on the next card, and we're just going to copy this again so we don't have to write it all out. We're going to do the same thing. So we're going to add the card to the list, step 2, proofing. But the first thing we're going to do is remove, no, we don't remove all labels. We want to remove the blue writing label from the card, then comma, and add the red proofing label to the card, and add the proofing checklist with the card to the card with the name proofing checklist. Okay, let's see if Butler understands. All good. So let's put this to the test. We have our writing. I'm going to move it over to proofing. Oh, I shouldn't have opened that. Okay, we're now at the proofing stage. And you can now see we've got our proofing checklist is now on here as well, which is awesome. Now, I'm going to not bother doing this with images. You're basically doing the same thing. So well, actually, let's do it. It's not going to take us long. So we're going to add another card. We're going to use the same thing, but we'll just change these details. So step 3, images, remove the, what color did we have? We had the red proofing label from the card, and add the pink images label to the card, and add the images checklist to the card with the name images checklist. Okay, so we've just done the same thing again. So that I'll show you that in a minute because that's obvious. It's going to just basically repeat the same process. Now the other thing we want to do we've got it removing the labels for us. And the last thing we want to do is if we actually publish something, we want it to tell us it's published, and we want it to not only remove those other labels, but we also probably want it to remove the due date at this point. That's optional, but otherwise you're going to have a whole lot of published things that look like they're overdue. So let's do a final one. When a card is added to the list, publish. Now remember, we have to go capitals because we've written it in capitals. Remove the, what are we up to? We're up to the pink. Removing the pink images label from the card, and add the green published label to the card. We don't want to add any checklists, but we do want to and remove the due date. So it's very, very logical, these commands. All right, yes, we understood. Okay, so we're going to see with our blog, we've finished the proofing. So whoever's proofing can move it over and say, great, next step, thanks. And it's going to take that off. It's going to pop the images on there. And then when we're done, we're going to publish it. It's going to remove our due date. It's going to tell us, great, this post is published. Hopefully by that point, all of your checklists have been ticked off, because that's the whole point. And now you've got a beautiful little list of published things. So let's just give a few more examples. So example A, example B, and example C. So let's just say that example A is not a guest blog post. We're going to, we'll assign our dates first. So let's just pop change due date. We're just going to pop some random dates on them, and then we'll go into the calendar and we'll actually move them, not labels, we'll actually move them to where we want them in the calendar, because it's a little bit easier to see in the calendar. So let's just save that. Okay, so we want to pop this one. Well, they've all had their date assigned now, so we're going to pop them in here, just so that we know they're no longer ideas. Then we're going to, oh, I've got a phone call coming through. How fun. So then we're going to pop example 1, they're all going to go through the writing, but example B has gone through the writing, and once we're going to let Butler do this, otherwise it'll probably crack it at me if I move it. This one's now moved over into proofing, so it's at the next step. And let's just say that we put this one over here as well. And this one we're very efficient. We're now up to the images step. Now, so you can see that you can pretty much move anything everywhere. And the great thing about this is in our calendar view, we can now drag these around to when they're due, whenever we want. And you can see exactly which step each one is up to based on these labels that we've included. So we know that this one's proofing, this one's images, this one's writing. And if you really want, you could even set up something in this so that, you know, when you move it to the images one, for example, you could actually ask Butler to assign a member to it. So we could assign me to those particular ones that are at the image stage, and it will pop my picture on them. And let's have a look in our calendar. No, it doesn't show the picture in the calendar, but that's okay because we just click on them anyway. But that means that I'll actually get an alert. So that way, when somebody drags it from proofing to images, Butler will add me on and I'll get a notification saying, great, this post is ready for you to add your images. So it's very, very handy. As you can see, there's so much you can do. This is really just, it's not really the basics. It's a bit more advanced than the basics, but this is just one example of how you can set up Trello and Butler. I really recommend jumping onto Butler just because it automates a lot of this for you. So, you know, all of our checklists and all of that wouldn't happen without having Butler on there as well. So this is just one example of how we can make a blog editorial calendar. I will post some other examples in the future of some of the other boards that I have. I have a recipe board happening. I have my planning for my week. I have my planning for my business overall and stuff like that. So I'll show you some of those other boards at another time. But for today, this is it. And thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was helpful to you. And I'd love to, if you have any questions, head over to my blog. I'll post the blog link in the comments of this video. And you can head over to the blog and ask any questions or grab the actual copies of these examples that we've used. I'm going to list them in the blog post. So please check that out and please subscribe if you'd like to see more videos in the future. Thank you so much for stopping by, and please check me out at sarahreneeclark.com. I have a training tab on my website where all of this kind of stuff will be hosted. So please check it out, and thank you for joining me today.